So next up we have Chien Nguyen, and he's going to talk to us about reusing previous simulation runs applications to environmental fluid dynamics.
Hello, and I just want to show just a few kinds of tricks in computing, because we are in Bangor University in North Wales, and we have used quite various tools of computing for our projects in natural hazards such as flooding, coastal flooding, etc. So we are using this supercomputing Wales facility with various modules in it. And we have seen that computing has becoming very important in nowadays. And we, besides simulating the climate system, we simulate the aerodynamics flows in industry. And all of this requires lots of computing resources to be involved. That's why we have facilities such as used here in SDFC, the Archer, and supercomputing Wales. And the problem is that if we are focused on such system, it will be very complex indeed. It will be either very turbulent, as Wendy's research earlier, or it will involve a very big scale, a global scale. And if we want to resolve the climate state in a very small scale to be useful, it will involve many cells, and not only horizontally to cover the whole globe, but also vertically. And the equations to be used to describe this phenomena is Navier-Stokes, which is highly nonlinear, and it will be very sensitive to initial conditions. That is the one big challenge to climate modeling. As we see, for example, this butterfly effect here. And if we specify an unrealistic condition, that will be not good. So to handle such very long and very complex simulations, there are certain tricks to speed up. Aside from the obvious techniques such as parallelization, I have found a very relatively less concerned one, that is using the hot start and reusing the previous runs for computing for the new scenarios. So very often in CFD practice, when they design optimal structure, to see how it interacts with the fluid, they will have to run many scenarios, but most of them are very similar. The only difference is when the structure impact with the fluid at some stage, which leads to vibration, for example. And also by doing heuristic approach, so they can reduce the computation time. And it's also for using hot starts. For example, we have carried long simulations, and we see that maybe we just simulate half of it and see the result we can save for restarting the later half. That should be okay. And hot start can be triggered by time or a particular condition. For example, when we reach stationary condition, when the system reach equilibrium, then we can stop and save the result into a hotstart file to be used later. On the other hand, we can reuse the computational result for later use. For example, if we are to compute the ocean tide and wave, okay, that will lead to transport of pollutant matters in the sea. Okay, so most scenarios would be they have already a flow field computed by earlier works by different group of researchers. So we just use that flow field to feed in the model and to see how the pollutants can be affected in that flow field. Okay, so this some notes from the CFD community that I mentioned earlier. In the wave structure interaction, the people from the Plymouth have seen this, and they already recommend this practice to the, I think, the handbook of wave structure interaction, so they can cut the cost of simulate the whole scenarios. Also, they see that the high fidelity codes like CFD are very time consuming for routine design in industry. So in certain cases, they just use a shortcut, a rule of thumb to determine the size of the structures, to cut the cost and not to simulate all the available scenarios. Also for the ship design, people from Germany, Hamburg, have this remarks on optimization procedure. Okay, so they have insist on the role of restarting from previous simulation. So the scope of this, so restarting has many applications in many scenarios. So I just want to focus on the application in environmental fluid dynamics only, and because we have contracts with NERC in particular to study the environment. Okay, so just to see how the pollutant will travel in our environment, and maybe sediment also, because we are interested in the erosion of coast and rivers. Okay, and in all simulations of these fields, we have seen that restarting and using the tracers frequently in our studies. But unfortunately, the environment is heterogeneous. It's not like environment that you can control the parameters like in our wave structure interaction and in our industry in applications. We cannot control the boundary conditions of the natural hazards that happened. And also the system is also non-linearity, and there are lots of uncertainty in the system that have to be addressed. The data collected about our environment is also not adequate. There are lots of missing data, lots of data with different datum. For example, the elevation taken by different survey itself. In our present project on flooding of the rivers, we have very difficult difficulties in synchronizing inundation data from survey data provided by natural resource wells and data that obtained from satellite. So it is very costly to set up and run environment model, because if any boundary condition change, then the system should be designed and run again. So we try to be very economic in such simulation. And some uncertainty here is can be seen from this climate scenario. In climate modeling, often they do not arrive in a certain result, but instead they do what is called ensemble modeling. They consider the probability of the variable, for example, the increase in the temperature or the concentration of greenhouse gases. And for different scenarios, they will kind of weighing and averaging all the results obtained to arrive at a probabilistic outcome. So for this, I would demonstrate a simple example for wave in the coastal zone. As we see that the wave environment continually change in our coastal area. The wave height can be very large or very small. The wave period can be long or short. Because of that, the wave is considered as a stochastic process. Okay, but eventually they will consider. We usually consider the wave by three parameters: the wave period, the wave height, and the wave direction, described by the angle of this vector. Okay, so let me show the area first. This area is the Bay of Ceredigion in the west of Wales. So in this region, we have the wave from the west. Okay, and the wave condition changes. If we were to describe the all time varying change of the wave, that will be very costly in computing. So instead of that, we will set up two steps. First of all, from initially tranquil sea state up to a sea state with big storm with wave height of 7.2 meters and a 12-second wave period. And the second stage to a little bit higher wave condition. So the model used is the SWAN model. The SWAN model is they divide the sea into various into a grid cell. This is a rectangular grid cells, and by imposing the wave coming from the west, we have a map of this significant wave height. You see, this is the most energetic region, and this is region with very low wave. So we compute by two ways. One is to focus the model with a time varying wave height. The other is to compute with two-step using a hot start. And we see a difference between these two approaches. For most of the bay, that the difference is not is very low. Most time the difference in significant wave height is less than 0.5 meters, which is less than 7%. However, in this region of the diffraction of the wave through this headland, the significant wave height can be lowered by 1.5 meters. Yeah, if we were to use the hot start approach. Yeah, so this should be accounted in our study. Yeah. Aside from the significant wave height, if we were to avoid this diffraction zone and focus only on the zone with widely open to the ocean, this red segment here, then we see most of the variables will be not biased much. It will be biased by only 1 to 3% difference between the hot start approach. So the hot start approach is actually a good way to deal with wave modeling in this case. And next, I'll show you a river flooding case. So we use a model called CoSeC flood, which is a hydromorphic model to describe how the water flows in the river and how the riverbed changes over time. Okay, but this time we only focus on the water flow only. So we have two approach. One is to run a simulation of 3 days, 10 hours. And the second is to make a hot start at 3 days and then continues to run for the remaining time. So what is the hot start file in this case? We stored only the water level for the hot start because originally this CoSeC flood model does not allow us to run from a hot start file. So what we do is we just store it for output file and then use that output file as an initial condition for the new runs. And the result is for the 5-hour simulation, the difference is not much. But after 10 hours, the hot start result start to deviate from the normal run by more than 10 centimeters in the water level along the river, which is not good. Yes, so we have to take into account also the velocity to use it as a hot start also. Another is case I would like to show is three-dimension fluid solver, which can solve with turbulent from high-speed jet. And this is a package called Jeris, which is written in C, and they allows us to provide a very descriptive input here. And for the purpose, because this simulation is very time-consuming in the order of days, so I try to write a hot start file, save file at frequently intervals, and also one hot start file at the end of simulation to use it for the next one. The Jeris is very ugly. This is the GUI visualization, but when we provide the input file, we should provide in the ASCII text, and this for the output file. Besides the ASCII text here, we see also the binary data injected in the files, and we had to be very careful. We use hex edit to change only the text part to get the result for the hot start. Otherwise, we will be right into the binary part, and it will be not good. So for using this hot start functionality, we are able to continue for a very long simulation with the 3D sense. We can also use result from a wave and tide flow to force the sediment transport. For example, this is case with a shoreline here, and we use the Sonsby Van Rijn rate of sediment transport flow. This is a very easy to implement procedure, which is based on the wave transport by the wave and transport by the tidal current separately, and then add to see what is the total tidal sediment transport between the cells. And also, for example, sorry for this Vietnamese, we can predict what the seabed level will change in time. And this shows erosion and deposition in the time. For example, this is half an hour interval, and there's a sub-millimeters change in bed elevation between these cells. Of course, it's a very coarse model, but we were able to extract the flow and the wave field to produce result which is of our interest. Besides sediment transport, we can use models such as ocean parcels, for tracing the pollutants in the global scale, or the ocean anions models written in the Julia programming language, which can, I think this is very interesting model in that we can write the code, and we can specify our artificial cases, and the case we can control its input. And of course, with this kind of scripting, we can, after we run, we can store the result and use that result as a hot start for the new simulation as well. So these very promising models which will surely be developed in the future for our purposes. So this, aside from the hot start, we can concern about the nesting of the models, which is another kind of extracting the information, but in a spatial scale. And while supercomputing is involved, we can think of restart of different partitions, which is also a problem. We can have different sensitivity analysis to see if the model runs correctly, and also provide better access to the data, because when we store large amount of data like this for future reuse, we have to make sure how the future users can make use of that. Okay, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you for telling us about your tips and tricks. Do we have any questions for Chien?
So just so I make sure I absolutely understand what we're talking about here. This is taking restart files, effectively, for simulation software, and then modifying parameters so they become hot start files, effectively. So it relies on software that has restart capability, I guess, as a starting point.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So my question then is, are you aware of any sort of initiatives or perhaps sort of pieces of software that might become useful across the HPC community that perhaps could simplify this process? So rather than having to, hex edit, restart files for some software. So some software is already very open, so OpenFOAM, for example, it's quite easy to make changes to the input parameters of restarts. But obviously others not so much. So are you aware of anything that sort of perhaps takes away some of the more manual aspects of this?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Longshaw. I would think some of it depending on the field that they are working. For example, for wave modeling with Swan, for example, they have built-in hot start here because the developer think beforehand that, okay, hot start is very necessary for ocean modeling, for wave modeling. But also for CFD, I think OpenFOAM or Jeris, they think that, okay, as we see that the practice in CFD, they have make heavy use of hot start. So yes, but some models like these river flow models, we are run out of luck. This has no hot start capabilities for that. So what we can best do is to invest to delve into the code and write some extension to the initial condition, so we can feed the output file into the initial condition. Okay, and your second question is to how to automatize the process. Yes, it is still very difficult because we cannot do it automatic yet, because to judge how the river flow is reaching equilibrium phase, to reaching equilibrium phase, a steady flow case, is not very easy. We cannot reach completely steady flow, and also because of our flooding condition changes every time. So again, it depends on the project we are working in. If the project involves with long-term flows, for example, seasonal flows, then we can compare on the flow hydrograph produced if the water level does not change much over time. Okay, so we stop here and we save as a hot start file. Yeah, so later we can restart it for a new flooding event, for example.
Any more questions? No? In that case, then please thank Chien for his talk. So that concludes session 2. So please do come back for session 3 on HPC and future of computing at 2 o'clock.